All right. How y'all doing? Just can't get away from that track. So it's me, it's Alan Sousa. Welcome to the Track for the Day podcast. And video cat podcast, all the fun stuff. So we're gonna jump into some really crazy stuff today, and I wanted to take a little bit of a different spin with it. And I'm trying to really keep these things going every single week. This will be the next one, episode two. It seems like it's been like so long since I put up the first one with it. Um, but I'll get used to it. I'm trying to navigate and manage all these things. It's just because the week was really kind of big and busy with all the stuff I had going on. So I'm pretty stoked and excited, and this will be a lot of fun to kind of really drop and to get everything moving with it. In today's episode, I want to take a look and discuss and play some of the old school stuff. Now, what brought this up? One track I didn't put on there that I'm saving it, maybe for the next one. Is just because I was listening to a lot of stuff, and I really wanted to hear. My ears just wanted to hear something like refreshed. And actually, what it was, I put in Diggable Planets, and I just remember Blowout Comb from Diggable Planets, and I remember walking into a joint where I was playing like regularly. I was like a regular performer there. Was it like 5 days a week at this one place? Um, and when I was a musician, and I would go in there before the actual place would open up and everything. And the owner was really deep into hip hop, and he had Blowout Comb playing. I was like, dude, what is this? I hadn't heard it, and it had just come out, and he was telling me, because at that point I was like really into the Roots, I was really getting some more of those kind of things. Wu-Tang Clan, I was just getting my feet wet with them, stuff like that. But when that came on, I was just like, man, what is this? And I just wanted to hear more of it. So I remember I went, and then the next pay period I went and I bought the album. Um, Not the vinyl, I actually bought the CD. And yeah, so it's kind of you can see how when the old fogey in me starts coming out, right? CDs, oh my gosh. Um, yeah, I'm not even gonna get started with all that. But anyways, it was just so exciting to hear that track, to hear that record. And I remember it was a Friday night, and I put it on, and I just had it on like continual loop, just the whole album. I was just playing it again and again and again. So after all the stuff I was checking out and listening to this week, and I just kind of like hit a rut because I had a lot of work that I had to like compress and like get pumped down like a 0 hour, and a lot of technical problems. I had like major tech problems this week. Um, I just wanted to hear something refreshing, so I went back to that album, and it was like, oh yes, And then obviously, then the algorithm starts bringing up all kinds of other stuff, and I'm like, oh, so you want to go here? All right, so we'll do this, we'll do this, and it was nice. It was fun. It was nice to hear some different stuff. And MC Light came on. I was like, oh man, we miss all this stuff. She's critical. I heard a nice interview from her. Man, she was talking about feminism in hip hop. Oh, dude, she's so articulate. This is great stuff. And then then obviously Queen Latifah came on, but it was Unity, UNITY from Queen Latifah. That was kind of fun. The poor righteous teachers came on. Oh, it's like, yeah, now we're like going back to the heyday. It's like when hip hop was like really hip hop. I mean, the language was just like unflowing. The criticism was like in there. The you, every single line had a prominence and importance. It wasn't just like slapped together because it was done for some record deal. It was like really cool. So the one I want to take a look at is actually from Eric B and Rakim, and this one's called "Paid in Full." And if you don't remember, this is like a hard title for me to remember. But once you hear it, you're gonna go like, "Oh yeah, that track." It's because the name has like it has representation to the track, which we're gonna talk about a little bit, but the argument that I'm bringing up here, and the reason I wanted to look at what would be considered old school hip hop now. I know old school, like back the mid '80s, and in the '90s. It's like Ah, but 2000s is considered old now. It's like, oh man. But the reason these things are so timeless is really because of their core element of it. And I was thinking about the four elements, the four to five elements of hip hop. Anyways, earlier this week, which I'll talk about in a moment. But you know what? Let's just listen to a little bit of the track. Let's just jump into it and we'll see if we break it all down. So here it is, Eric B and Rakim. This is called Paid in Full. Okay, so it's like a classic track, and the narrative is so nice. It's so wonderful, to see and to hear, what he does. And yeah, it's a complete composite. I love the bongos, because it really kind of harkens back to the Bongo Brothers, and then what became the track Apache, which the Incredible Bongo Brothers, and their use of that track, which we're gonna definitely have to talk about and deconstruct. And if you buy my book, Without Reservations, Are You Still Ready for War? I have a whole chapter on that track, Apache. It's inside of there, so it'll break down the analysis of it. But it's those bongos, it's kind of bring it back to it. But the narrative is so clear, and he talks about why he's paid in full because he spent all his money, and then he has to like find a job, but he's like, he doesn't want to do a 9 to 5 because he misses it all. So he's like, hey, I'm doing all this poetry and writing all this stuff and everything. Let's just bring that out. So, but the walking through it, all of the samples, all of the other slices and dices and everything that's that he walks you through the feminist thing. If you're watching the video of it, because you can see I give you the link, to the video on the notes, and it's it's like a whole expose just unto itself, with what he's doing there, and how he puts it all together. And then him, dressed in his quasi, Black Panther, attire, which is classic for the time. So, he's calling that all out as well, but modernizing and contextualizing for what's going on today. Okay. well, we got we'll skip the pump up the volume, whole thing, which is so funny to me to hear, because if you want to talk about then what would be the title track with paid in full, it's actually going to be that we're paid in debt with what's going on, and so Rakim. And Rakim was the scratch artist, in the back with it all. Um, if you really want to drop this into what's happening today, especially with the socioeconomic pressures that we're under, and with the coming of the 2026 budget that we're going to have to all face, and this whole tariff issues, and now we have the whole redistricting, that's going to be going on, especially here in the state of California, and it's going to start waging across the country. Texas is on it. Idaho, was it Ohio? Is the next one? I know there was some push for Iowa, which is like that's not going to happen. But there's so it's going to start coming up. The 2028 elections are already starting to look at and whatnot. But then the cuts they're coming. And they were already having to see the culture wars that are already starting to take place. The things that are happening in Washington D.C. With the ICE. And the militant. The military being brought in to bring civility to a city. This for redirecting attention away from other political issues that are going on and to save face for things. I mean, his track really kind of talks about what's going on today because it's really about what's the poor man to do. And that's what he's kind of bringing it down to. He's like, look, I'm a kid from the hood. I used to be a gangbanger. I would hold you up for your money. This is how I used to make it. And he even says in there, I gotta find a way to make my dead prez. That's money. Those are, that's, the dead presidents. That's the money. So he's talking about, but if we really want to say they wouldn't be paid in full, because in that day and age, in the Clinton administration, and then especially in the leading up until it would be the Biden and then the first, I'm sorry, the Obama and then the Biden administrations, there was some leverage in some ways um, for a kid from the hood to have some levels of mechanism. Now, it wasn't so much in the Clinton administration, don't get me wrong, but definitely come the Obama administrations and eras there. There was some leverage that was able to be employed with it civically. So at least there was a glimmer of hope. It hasn't been exceptional, but at least there's been glimmers of it. So it wouldn't be, but today it would not be paid in full at all. It's like paid in debt. The rising of all the prices that we have to go through, that we're living through, with especially because now the tariffs are hitting us all. And they're gonna just be bombardment as they come up. So we have all these different things that are happening. So Rakim's track here, if we drop it in the context of what's going on, you can't just say it's all about money in that sense. Excuse me, it's a critique of the culture. Then is the culture paid in full? And I would say no. It's going back to this paid in debt. And let's just talk about just for a moment the culture wars that are going on with the Smithsonian. The shutdown, the sanitization, not the shutdown, but the sanitizing, of what's happening in for that's proposed to happen for the Smithsonian. All of them, I mean, there's 8 major museums that are involved with it of the 41 that are there, that exist and fall under that umbrella. And that's our cultural repository, for the country. Every other country in the world, and I've mentioned this before, has some administrator or ambassador of the arts, a cultural ambassador, every single one. We're the only country that doesn't. And so the Smithsonian and the Kennedy Center have served as that, and that's what they come to be and have claimed to be, without stating it. Now, the fact that the current administration is taking them over and is superseded the board of directors at the Kennedy Center and has placed the president himself as the chairman of the board of the Kennedy Center. What? And then to say that you're going to do the same thing and you're passing a mandate, on the Smithsonian, where if you don't, and if they don't follow the principles that you put out for there for 2026, you're going to withhold funding. What? I mean, that's just really hitting below the belt culturally speaking. Um, and then the cuts that are happening now to the public media, it doesn't matter if you agree with it or not, if you like it or not. I mean, truth be told, I mean, there were some times when I was, like all gung ho for public media, the PBS stations and whatnot, and then and then I went to like not commercial, but it's just like I just got tired of hearing the same people giving out the same schlock all the time. I needed to hear some variety with it. So but I'm not glued to PBS News every night anymore. Is what I'm saying. I had to widen my scope. But that's for a whole another debate and argument. But the cuts to it, and but what that programming does to serve the rural communities. And in some places, that's the only outlet, not only of entertainment, but of news and sources and of what's going on inside the world. And when things are happening and changing, especially in our climate, the shifting and adjusting that's happening with our climates, if so people have to kind of know what's going on, for road closures, for school access, for all kinds of different things, that are taking place, local, and state, news, as well as national, what's going on, in the rare cases, to cut it and to gut it, that doesn't make any sense to me. And of course I understand, I'm just the minor voice that's inside of this, but it's articulating across these larger planes. So Rakim is bringing up Eric B is bringing up some very interesting, points in his conversation about, just wanting to get a job. How am I going to make money? That's it. That's what he's talking about. Is what is the manufacturing process that I can subscribe to today in order to make money? And I'm saying that if we look at it from the point in time when he existed, the leverages might have been there. Where nowadays it's getting a lot harder. The shutting down and the closing and the crackdown on university systems. UCLA is the newest one to join the crowd. It's not going to stop. And so that kind of attack on our culture and education purposes. Forget the fact that we're not going to have a Department of Education anymore. What is that saying about the culture? What is that saying about our climate and society? As a nation state, it's saying that we are no longer becoming a nation. It's becoming a singular entity. It's becoming a homogenized ideological perspective that's autocratically and imperialistically defined, redefining colonialism internally on its own people. This is what's going on. And so and I write about this extensively in lots of different places. But it's also important to kind of see and to note what's happening with it. And so for me, hearing this track from Rakim isn't just kind of a nice, comfortable, blanket that you can just throw over your ears and just say, "Oh, yes, that was when hip hop was really hip hop, the golden eras," you know. But because that just then makes you feel like not only feel old, but at the same time, it really kind of like, why are you living in a rearview mirror? So updating and looking at what's going on is that I can actually see this work as being a call to attention, not a call to arms. Because you're not taking up forces. Because I have a problem with the terms resistance and protest, and because I'm a decolonial theorist, where resistance is singularly defined, protest is a group, compendium, and then a decolonial is it's a feedback loop where it starts with you, but then also has a community involvement. And for me, that's the only one that actually has some principles of process and ability to actually make a difference inside of our cultural state and social, political, economic union that we have. Because if you just resist it, they have the power over you. Because the resistance doesn't exist without the power structure. So you're always fighting against a power source. So that means they have control over you. If you're going to protest it, it's exactly the same kind of a thing. It's just that now it's multiple voices that are being put inside of it because you have to have something to protest against, and it might bring attention for the moment, but it hasn't really kind of shown or proven that it's going to be able to make some kind of a leverage or difference. The 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 strategies across and around the world that have actually made some kind of a difference with it isn't just a protest movement, even though that's the language that's used. It's a decolonial process. Think of the uprising in India. It's where they refuse to have to deal with and maintain the colonial ethic. They decolonize themselves in order to make that a successful campaign. We talk about it as a protest movement starting as a resistance movement, but it's actually a decolonial process. That's what's successful. And because then there's the feedback loop. It can start with one person, but then it has a community that gets reached out to, and then the community feeds the person feeds the community, back and forth. In a resistant movement, it's one direction. In a protest movement, it's circular because you're all just feeding each other. It's not going anywhere. But in a decolonial process, it's moving because that entity is alive and thriving because it's feeding off of each other. So, plus it also opens up it leaves itself open for other agents of change, which the other ones don't. They're locked down. In a resistance, you're not. In the resistant movement, you have one principle, one doctrine, because you're also fighting against a singular authoritative force. In a protest movement, it's the same thing. You're fighting against one singular perspective, so you're not open to other avenues of ability to change because you have one principle that you're fighting against. In a decolonial ideology, you are open, and you must be open to alternative avenues of decolonizing yourself because you're not working against the colonizer. You're working, to oppose those forces, but your opposition is your growth. You're not defining yourself by the colonizer's tool. That's just it. I mean, but that's for real. And so Eric B, is bringing this out. He brings it out very well. He's bringing it though back to just like personal economics. It's like, how am I going to how am I going to make it ice? How am I going to make it rain in here? We got to get some money, and I totally understand that process, and what he's going through. And so he leans back on what it is that he knows, his culture. He leans back on his talent. And so, and that's what he says. He goes in the studio, and then, after all that, and he puts it out there, and it's that's when he can start getting paid in full, with the recording and the producing of it. It seems simplistic, but he's doing it inside of a rap, and he has, a limited amount of time. How long is this track? Hold on a second. Let's take a look here. The track is 3 minutes and 39 seconds. So, he's got a limited amount of time that he has to kind of state his narrative. But the other thing is this, it's an actual eloquent narrative. He walks you through all the different things that he does, and he's using, the language of the time, he's using, a structure where he's going, and there's a very firm and thread, of the storytelling that's going on with it. It's a great track, but if we want to update it and look at what's going on today, I would say it's not paid in full, we're paid in debt because we're living in a debtor society now. And it's not just economically speaking, it's politically speaking, it's socially speaking, it's, religiously speaking, it's, environmentally speaking, it's, we're living in debt. We're just trying to get out of debt. So it's an interesting great track. I like it a lot. There's a lot of value in place for it. So take a look at it, listen to it. All the stuff is down below. I want to draw your attention before we get out of here that you can go check out my new website, alanchusa.com. It's mine, finally. I got my name back as it was it was out of my control for a long time. And so it's the one that I house and put up there. So it's meager, it's simple. I understand. And I'm not flashy. I'm not going to do that. It's straight to the chase. So check it out, alanchusa.com. You can also go and check out all the great stuff that's happening at the Indigenous Hip Hop Business Association, ihhba.org. So you want to go there and you can check out all the good stuff that we're doing, all the time. The events are up there, workshops are up there, our featured artists are up there. Our podcasts are up there as well, so you can look at that, and then all of our articles are cross posted also, and our social media handles are there, so you can check that out. The YouTube channel is up and going, so that's at the real ihhba.org, or I'm sorry, That's at the Real IHHBA on YouTube. You can check out mine. That's Professor Alan Achusa on YouTube as well, and all the links are on both of those websites. So you can check out all those kinds of things. And then don't forget, you can also look at and follow us on our Substacks. So I want to make sure that people get all the information also. So that was a fun little adventure, and let's just get ourselves out of here nice and politely, if you don't mind, and let's get this whole ball going.